Good morning and welcome to this week's recruitment discussion with Jump. This week I'm going to describe this, we're going a little bit obscure, but you know, this is the one where we can have a massive impact on a business from a solo recruiter to a multinational business because what we're talking about is personal branding and a personal branding playbook for recruitment leaders, building their visibility to win business. And it's a tricky one for leaders to get their head round. So I'm going to give some stats first and foremost, which is going to sort of try help leaders understand this. And these stats have come from all over the place. So I'm not going to tell you where they've come from, but they have. If you want a list of them, I'm happy to give you them. So business owners, personal branding significantly impacts on the company value, customer trust, and lead conversion rate. So look at the financial part. So the market value, executives estimate that 44% of their company's market value is directly attributable to the CEO's reputation. Shareholder returns, founder-led companies outperform non-founder-led counterparts by 2.1 times in their total share returns. Premium pricing, customers will pay up to 13.57 times more for services from those that they consider elite experts compared to the average industry professional. And investment confidence, 87% of investors will invest with a company with a well-developed personal brand where it significantly changes the funding decision of that person based on the brand leader. You then look at customer trust. 77% of customers are more likely to buy from a company when its CEO uses social media and is the face of the company. 82% of people trust companies when more of their senior executives are active in that way. Lead conversion from a sales point of view, leads generated through personal branding and employee social media channels convert 7 times more frequently than any other lead. And systematically through leadership can lead to dramatic results. So one enterprise SaaS client founder said he reported a 340% increase in inbound demos requests over a 90-day period when he personally went out and talked about what they wanted to do. And the last one, which is more for everybody here from a recruitment point of view, a strong personal brand can increase positive results in attracting talent by 70% and retain talent by 77%.
Yeah.
All about the leader's profile. So, Dave, you're back in the chair today, which is great. So let's kick off as always and push into this one from there. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, etc., if you want to follow us, please subscribe. That'd be great. First question, Dave. Most leaders will tell you personal brand matters and then spend nothing on it and measure it from nothing. Why is a leader's personal brand still one of the most important unutilized commercial levers in recruitment? And what is the cost of the leaders who ignore it?
Yeah, morning, everyone. I think first thing to say is well done, Have, for getting the memo about what to wear on
black.
If you are watching this and you're not wearing a black t-shirt or black sweatshirt, please go and get changed now. But don't miss the content. I mean, in some respects, Howard, the stats that you used at the beginning are the answer to the question. The cost of not developing your personal brand and having a very proper personal brand is all the things that come out in the stats. That first one you said about 44% of market value is attached to CEO reputation. I think kind of answers the question because your personal brand is essentially your most powerful business tool for recruitment. Because you are the product. People buy into you and your company. And what your company provides, the services that we as recruiters provide, but it comes via us first. Your reputation, your judgment, your network are so important. And it's amazing to me the number of recruitment leaders that I speak to, even today, who would say, yeah, but I don't want to be out there. I don't want to be on LinkedIn. I don't want to push myself because I've got some good consultants. but actually it's the people you're trying to reach, be they candidates, be they clients, be they partners, whoever it is. They're going to look at you and they're going to think, yeah, that's somebody that I want to get alongside, someone I can work with. So it's a kind of bugbear of mine, always has been, develop your own personal brand, and it's so important, particularly because we're in the people business. We're not selling product. We're placing people. We have a responsibility for people, our staff, our clients, our candidates, and so it matters. Your judgment, your reputation, your network absolutely matters.
I think I've been working with clients, I think the thing that I've sort of come across is that most leaders treat personal branding as marketing, and it's not. It's a commercial infrastructure. It's a single asset that stimulates lower cost of client acquisition, cost of hire, and fee resistant, I suppose, if you want, so fee resistant from dropping it. And I think the reason it gets ignored is that there's no line on the P&L, but every leader who builds a deliberate sort of branding properly can point out inbound clients, inbound hires, higher win rates that come from it. And I think one of the most undiscussed benefits is staff retention. Team members stay longer in a business where their leader is respected externally. They're proud to say that they work for that person, and that pride is one of the stickiest forms of loyalty there is. And I think we've got to start to think about that. If you've got a revolving door, it's probably your brand that's helping that. And I think in a crowded, commoditised industry, the agency's sort of positioning rarely goes beyond the leader's positioning. And I think if the founder is invisible, the firm is invisible. And I think we see that quite a lot where your founder's invisible, that the firm becomes invisible too. So the cost of ignoring, I think it compounds. Every year the leader stays invisible. Competitors are banking on that relationship, and they're banking their own equity relationship by being visible. And there becomes it near impossible then to stay within a business because you get displaced by somebody who's more there. And I remember having this conversation at Computer People. We lost a £4 million account because our CEO at the time didn't want to go visit the client, didn't want to be involved with the client. And guess who went? Mr. CEO of Alexander Mann, who we know at the time was. He went, wined and dined the guy. We lost a £4 million revenue stream purely because the CEO got involved in the sale. So it is really important from there. Okay, so let's move that. If a leader came to you tomorrow and said, prove to me that building my personal brand will move the P&L, how would you answer that? And what are the metrics that you would actually track? And what does a strong leadership brand realistically unlock in fees, win rates and margins, etc.?
Well, for me, when you think of KPIs and you think of P&L and you think in terms of money, and rightly so, but the real currency in recruitment is trust. And clients are asking you to handle sensitive mandates. Candidates are trusting you with their careers. People are working with people they don't know. And they're hoping that everything will go okay, be that your consultants, be that your team that's collecting the cash, anybody in your organization who is interfacing with people, it's trust that is the currency. And for me, developing your personal brand is building that equity of trust. Do I think this guy, this lady, I can trust them with my career? I can trust them with my career if I'm a candidate, my career if I'm an employee. So I think the measures around that is how you build relationships and keep those relationships. If contractors who are working for you are finishing, are they happy to be represented by you when they're looking for another job? How do you engage with your permanent candidates when you place them? What is the career profile like for your staff? All of that absolutely matters, and all that is about trust. And I've always maintained that trust is the currency in recruitment that matters the most. And then you can look at things like client retention that you already said, market influence. What's going on in the market? Well, what does Mr. Smith from Agency A say about it? I want to know his opinion. I want to know her opinion about what's going on. And even with people that you've not met when you're on a BD call, trust, building that trust at scale is what matters.
So I think I looked at it and said I would measure three metrics: inbound inquiries by source, the win rate when a leader is visible in the pitch, and inbound applications from senior billers. That's the thing that I would look at. That's the things that you were sort of talking about that. And I think a strong leadership brand typically lifts or wins around about 10 to 20% on pitches of businesses that they have worked on there.
Yeah.
However, because a buying client has already made a partial decision on whether they're going to buy or not, usually based on the leader's positioning in the
Yeah.
marketplace and what they've
Yeah.
done, because they're already doing that due diligence on what's going on, what you're saying. That due diligence is happening. And therefore, if your leader is more visible, they're more likely to do that. On fees, I think I remember going to clients and having this situation at the same time. Because you're visible, the leader there, you can hold the line on fees. There is less pressure because the pressure is put on a consultant to reduce the fees or drop the fees, etc. There's less pressure on you when you're there. So you convert more work into retained models. You walk away from bad situations fast because you've got the financial control from that. And that drops straight onto your margin if you're holding your fees, etc. And I think you probably get more across the line. I know when I went to pitches, I got more across the line because it was peer-to-peer selling, and that respect and trust which you were talking about has been outlined because you are saying we are going to do this because you are the final point of contact and the stopping point. And if they trust you and if you deliver that, then you are. And I think on talent, and I've seen this every time, senior billers who join you because of the leader's profile or your management team's profile. And that sort of helps. It reduces obviously your head-to-head, not head-to-head, rec-to-rec fees and things like that. But I think it starts to change. And I remember being an area manager at a business and I was still selling. And I remember two people came from one of our major competitors, both high billers. And I asked the same question, and it was a really funny answer because at the time, typical Yorkshire area, Tetley Bitter had an advert out saying, if you can't beat them, join them. And I asked why they were coming, and they said, because we see you, as in me, everywhere. Every time we walk into a client, they talk about you. Every time we go into a client, they talk about you and your services. And so we've said, if you can't beat them, join them, which was the old Tetley Bitter advert at the time.
And joking apart, a lot of that was pre-internet.
Absolutely pre-internet.
So visibility was really key because you had to be at events, you had to be in the car park, you'd be in the bar. Now we have social media and we have the internet. There's no excuse for not being intelligently visible online, posting things that make sense, being involved in communities that make sense, having a good network, as well as the physical visibility of being at events and almost doing things like we're doing now, talking to people and building community.
So I think the point is on this sort of question, it's not about precision. I think it's about patterns. Once the leader starts to measure things, their commercial case becomes more obvious. Within a couple of quarters, if you start to turn up at pitches, turn up at clients that you want to grow, etc., then you start to see the uplift from that. And that's when brand stops being, I don't have time, to being a project of a leadership priority that you need to go out there and be branding yourself out there. And I think there's a very difference in that a lot of people don't think about that. And you're right. When I was doing that as a sales manager, it was pre-internet. So it was all about word of mouth. But then it was all about what you said you were going to deliver. If you delivered it, then you got it back there. And if it's coming from you, the manager, then that was fine.
That they were the days that we would turn up on our horse with our abacus and our satchel, and we talk about what's this computer you thinking? What is it? It's the size of a barn.
Talking about mainframes. Let's move on. Okay, so let's talk about positioning then. Positioning is where most leaders go wrong, I think, before they even write a post. So what's the difference between a leader with a sharp positioning and one with generic visibility? And how do you actually help a leader decide what they want to be known for who needs to know it, and what they should unlock for the business.
And that's the decision bit that we spend quite a lot of time working with founder leaders of recruitment businesses, helping them decide what they want to be known for. Because sometimes the conversation goes, oh, we do this and we do this and we want to do this and we've got this. It's like, no, what one or two things do you want you as a recruitment leader and your business to be known for? Well, we've always had this saying that if you don't position yourself in the market will position you. And that applies to your company and your brand, and that applies to your personal brand. Because the recruitment market is so crowded, it's so competitive. So having a clear point of view, both on your sector, on what good hiring looks like, on leadership, on trends, on data, it differentiates you from all the noise. There is so much noise, when we joke about pre-internet, but now the internet's there, it just means everything gets noisier and everybody can see and everybody can hear everybody shouting. So if you're clear and you're concise and you have a market position in your brand, you're then positioned as an authority. And if you're trying to place candidates or attract people to your business, who doesn't want to work alongside somebody who has authority, who is a leader in that market, who has the intelligence to be able to articulate what's going on in the new world of work? So I think it's very important to find the position for you as a personal leader in your personal brand, as well as for your business.
I think it's interesting because I talked about or thought about this, that the root of their problem is a brand problem. Yeah. And I think talking about that positioning and sharpening their position answers those three questions in the question that we asked. What do you want to be known for? Who needs to know it, and what commercial outcomes will it unlock? And I think most leaders don't think about that and can't actually answer that. So your generic visibility is effort without leverage, where sharpening your position makes every post talk,
Yeah.
and every meeting sound, properly. So it's the same hours, but that you put into that type of marketing, but with a radical different return. And I think, if we started to test our leadership, and I have this conversation with quite a number of my clients, that can your leaders team or can people in your business describe your position in the same way that you would describe your position in the market? And if not, then you don't have a position problem, you actually have an activity problem. And I think we've got to start to think about how we position ourselves into there. So great positioning, I think, is narrowed. It's got to be really narrow. It's got to be defensible, and it's got to be commercially aligned to what you do. And I think it's got to be narrow enough for you to own it. I think it's got to be defensive enough for you to be different to everybody else. And I think it's got to point directly at your clients, your talent, and what fees that you actually want from there. And you talked there about one-to-one coaching that we've done. And I think leaders really lack the capability to build a brand. What they lack is the clarity about which brand to build.
Yeah.
And once that's unlocked, that brand becomes execution, and they execute that. And I thought about this when I wrote this question. Think about Steve Jobs or Apple. Think about Richard Branson or Virgin. Which brand was stronger? I'd say Steve Jobs and Richard Branson's was equally stronger than their businesses. But now look at Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, and the list goes on. Mark Zuckerberg are all as strong or stronger than their actual brands. And that's what they stand for. So I think there's an opportunity here for the recruitment leaders, whether you're a solo business or whether you are a multinational business, to be stood up into your marketplace and be that person, that beacon of, be the Richard Branson, be the Steve Jobs of your marketplace. I think that's a very different place to be.
Yeah.
And yet we seldom do that, should I say. So here's the question that this comes out quite a lot as well, on certainly with my one-to-ones with my clients and what I'm talking about with my recruitment leaders. Most leaders don't have a content problem, they have a time problem. And they believe building a brand means posting every day, and that's not a game that they want to be in, etc. What does it realistically do? Is it sustainable visibility strategy look like from a leader's point of view? And where should they concentrate their efforts versus spending time themselves to think in that sort of brand way? And I think that's a question that most leaders ask me at this point when we start to talk about what you should be posting.
And part of the reason why they ask you and I that, Howard, is because they want a definitive data-led answer that often marketing can't give you, because it takes a little while to build up your brand. So if you say to a leader, spend an hour every day creating your sphere of influence by posting, by writing white papers, by putting something on your website, what they're hearing is, well, that means I'm not spending an hour doing business development. And what I encourage them to think is, well, absolutely, that's exactly what you're doing in terms of business development, because your knowledge is your influence in the market. You are often more of a USP than your business is. There are plenty, for example, of education recruitment businesses that all do the same sort of thing, but she or he is the leader. There's only one of them, two of them in a business, maybe. Yeah. So spend time developing your influence and your knowledge of the market and sharing that, because that becomes a really big differentiator. And the whole idea of positioning yourself in the market and developing your brand is to generate inbound leads, to generate people who phone you, candidates who phone you, to say, "Oh, actually, yeah, I'm interested. I saw your boss, your was speaking at an event or was posted something on LinkedIn." Or a candidate may say, "I'm interested in your company. I'd like to register with you. I'd like to talk to one of your consultants." Or, and you used the term rec to rec last time, when people are trying to they're trying to find talent for their own business. Well, how much easier is if somebody's working for a competitor, for example, and they phone you and say, I saw her, she was brilliant at this event. She was brilliant online. She really informed me or gave me some new, I'd like to work for you. Yeah. Well, how much does that cost? Does that save you a fee of 10 grand, 20 grand? Yeah. If you get three or four clients a year from that, what's that worth? 50 grand, 60 grand? It depends on what market they're in, it depends on how long the people stay. But positioning yourself and building your personal brand creates inbound opportunities for you and your team to close. And I think it's so important.
Do you know what? I've been reviewing this quite a lot over the last couple of months with clients talk to me about various different things. And I think this is a difference between the daily posting consultant game and what a CEO, MD should be posting. And I think if you think about that consultants game, it's designed by people who are coaching them to fill their pipeline every day. But actually, what you do it saying is it's the brand specialists who are coming in and saying post every day because they want to keep their pipeline filled. They want to keep
Yes. Yeah.
their people filled.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think leaders running an agency need a very different tool to that, need a very different model, one that compounds without consuming. Because again, you could talk about consultants. I don't know what to post every day. I can't post everything every day. And yet, all these brand leaders out there say you need to post 3 times a week. You need to post about that, and yet they can't do that. So I think the rule for a leader, it's quality over quantity, and it's concentration over spread. So one weekly post that's a clear point, a clear point of view that will outperform 5 generic posts on nothing. And I think it's the rhythm of the leader. One weekly post, one monthly long-term form of piece of information, one quarterly anchoring moment. As you said, keynote speaking and things like that, flagship pieces for research, high signal events. These are things that aren't noise. These are things that benefit from there. And I think the biggest single unlock is that sort of signature theme. So, what's the 3 themes that you return to repeatedly over a long period of time? How deep are they? How memorable are they? How authoritatively are they that you're talking about? And I think rotating through random topics builds none of those. So we're back to those things of recruitment. What are the things that your client's talking about? What is it that you want to be known for? Who wants to know those things? Then you can pick those themes around those and start to build. Okay. And that relieves the stress of what do I have to post about, because you know the themes that you're posting about and you can
Yeah.
write those
Yeah.
themes constantly. And I
Yeah.
think the difference is that the consultants are trying to get a positioning today within the marketplace for what they're trying to place. So they're trying to drive to candidates and appeal to candidates more than anything else. I think a leader, if you can't sustain that cadence for 12 months, then you haven't got the right cadence, because I think brand is built over years. A CEO's brand is built over years, where a consultant's brand is built over weeks. And the leaders who win are the ones who never stop showing up and keep those three things constantly at the heart of the thread that they're talking about and working on. And I think that's the bit that I always think about, is that cadence. We know that our consultants have problem with cadence, just doing it 3 times a week. And our clients, our CEOs, MDs, etc., it's that cadence. If you're doing it once a week and then have one of those 3 topics that you're talking about, that means that's 3 weeks topics already covered. Final week might be a roundup of those topics, start them again. If you can't do that 12 times in a year, that's poor.
Yeah.
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 And I say brand is built over a long period of time. It's not built overnight, where consultants is built overnight. If we look then, we talk to a lot of clients, but some of them are, look at that. We talk a lot of clients, but some of the biggest commercial wins from a leader's brand, from showing up in talent. So why, we've touched on this a bit already. Why do top recruiters today increasingly choose the agency where a leader has a strong market profile? And what does that leader's brand need to signal to attract billers that would otherwise, or they'd otherwise have to headhunt or pay a recruitment fee for?
Well, the first thing to say about your personal brand is it brings in your personality. And leaders and consultants, people in general, they want to work for people that they think are exceptional. Everybody does. You don't want to work with people you look at and think, oh, I'm not sure about those. So if your brand is strong, your personal brand, if your authority about the business, about market intelligence, about market trends, about data is strong, then that sounds like a person I'd like to work with. Add to that your personality and what are you doing? Where are you? Where have you been? That brings a whole life bit about you as an individual, what you're like as a leader, what you could be like as a boss. Because I don't know you, I only see you online, or I only see you speak at an event. But if I know a little bit about you and you shared a bit of your personality, and I'm not saying show hundreds of holiday photos, but I am saying that maybe like you do, how you will go camping, you'll take the van and you will show a picture of something on there, and it's really interesting. But then I know a little bit about you. I know, okay, this is a guy that likes camping, likes the wild, likes sports, likes rugby. I posted something a couple of weeks ago. I took my daughter down to Folkestone and we had a marvelous meal at a restaurant. And I posted it because I wanted to honour her because she'd been working hard for GCSEs. But the feedback that I got was really strong because it's saying, okay, this guy may be a family guy. And those sort of things are really important because it's when we work, we talk about work-life balance, which is a phrase I've never really liked, but it's life. And work is a bit of it. So if you're developing your personal brand, what do you like to do? How do you like to play it? If you can relate that to work, then fantastic. But don't feel pressurized that you have to. Just show us a little bit about your personality. Because if I'm looking to join your company, or I'm a candidate that wants to work through your company, or I'm a channel partner that wants to work alongside you, I think personality and brand really, really matters.
So it's interesting. I think you hit the commercial brutality of it straight away, that you're going to save yourself a 20%, 30%, recruitment fee from an R2R. But also if you get a good biller coming to you, their uplift, will be a lot quicker. because they're coming because they trust you. And I think senior billers sort of probably make three judgments before they even speak to you. What can I learn from this person? Will it
Yes,
enhance my
yes,
own? Will it enhance my own reputation going there? Is another one. And is this business going somewhere? And I think your personality, your brand, answers those questions for people if they can see those type of things. And I think even as a small, when I was running my own recruitment agencies, I was taking good consultants from other recruitment agencies because they could see where I was going and they could understand my reputation. And I think billers, they choose where they want to go, and
yes,
they
yeah,
increasingly choose agency where their leaders are visible but have credible market profiles. And that's because how they assess what they're walking into. If I'm going to see this person here and I assess that what I'm walking into, that's what they expect. And that creates that first interview opportunity. If you're walking in and get the same experience as you get when you met the person or when you saw them do something, or it's in line with the post that they're posting out, etc., then you start to think that. So what it does, you talked about the company is a reflection of the leader. So what your brand needs to signal is standards, culture, growth, and credibility. It's not about hustle, volume, wins. Top billers tend to filter those things out and they look at what's in it for them as a person. So what's the standards like? What's the culture like? What's the growth? What's the credibility like? And I think I've sort of alluded to this a little bit earlier. So if you're struggling to hire, or even worse, you're losing people to the competitors, that's not a talent problem. That's a brand problem.
yeah,
And that's
yeah,
your brand
yeah,
and your
yeah,
company brand. And I think that's the bit that we've got to think about is that, standards, culture, and growth and credibility are things that exude from you because that's you. What's your standards? What's your culture? What's your growth? What's your credibility? Because that then filters down to the whole of the company.
yeah.
And I think that
That's
that's
right.
really
That's
important
right.
how
That's
that
right.
how that works.
Yeah.
So if we then start to think about this, let's look for leaders thinking about long-term value and saleability of their agency. So again, we get this quite actually, how can I sell my business? What's it worth, etc. So how does a well-known leadership brand change the equation when it comes to selling? What does it strengthen from an enterprise value in positioning, pricing power, buyer perception, and where can a strong founder brand actually become a risk in a sale if not managed properly?
Well, I'll take the second part of that question first. It becomes a risk if your brand is the only thing, is the only brand that people see when they think of your company. Because, for example, if you're thinking about selling your business and all the other metrics, KPIs that we talk about are correct, but everything is around you, then if you're going to buy a business and potentially earn some significant life-changing money, but disappear, and there's nothing else behind it, then the buyer is going to think, well, hang on, I don't want this person to walk away because they are the brand. So there's two parts of this positioning, isn't there, Howard? There's you being the brand ambassador for your company and your company's people who follow you, people who are your leadership team, doing the same thing. So you've got a strong second line. They're all doing the same thing, developing their own personal brand. So if you as a leader leave, actually there's plenty of other people that do the same sort of things that you do. Because service and cash and EBIT and P&L and L and geography and management team and all those things are good. Yeah. Personal brand is one of those things that's in those top 10 value creations or value drivers. But only if other people are doing the same thing in your company. Yeah. So if other people follow you as a leader, your leadership style is good, you're encouraging other people to do the same thing, then if I'm going to invest in your business, I know that other followers who work for you are doing the same thing. It's much less of a risk. But I've been in a position at Spring where we've bought a number of companies. But we've always wanted a balance between those 10 value drivers, the trend of profit, the story, the execution, the processes, and the leadership style. Yeah, these are good leaders. If they're going to come into our business, we'd want them in our business. If we're going to give them some money, then they're going to exit. What's it like underneath? what's the personal brand of the other people like underneath. So you've got to get that balance, otherwise it does become a risk.
Think it's interesting you mentioned EBITDA and multiples and things like that, your profit. And I think, well-positioned founders lifts that enterprise value. So you start to think about, so you're right, positioning, pricing power, and I think talent density, whether it's the density of the people working for you or the density of the talent that you can attract for your clients. And then it's about the buyer's perception. Will other people want to come and work with this business for that? And I think buyer's perception specifically is a really interesting one when you talk about a well-known leader reduces perceived execution risk. Because I think a well-known leaders they see we're going to work with that because they've got a good leader. So they see that. So a buyer pays a premium for a business that has demonstrated it command the marketplace. And I think once you can understand that you command the marketplace, then that's a very different thing. So it doesn't matter about the size of your agency because brand is about how it makes people feel.
Yeah.
When you're either working with that person or that person who owns the brand is working for you, brand is about evoking a feeling. And that you mentioned it right at the beginning, a feeling of trust. And I'll put again onto that a feeling of quality. But there's the trap. If your brand only lives in the founder, it becomes the founder's risk in the sale. But if you remove the founder, then all that disappears. So buyers discount that heavily when it comes to brand that can't survive the exit of the leader. And you start to think about, go back to Steve Jobs and Apple when he first exited, it had a massive effect on Apple's.
It did. It did.
So I think you've got to be building three different brands that will increase your PE number. And those three brands are your CEO's brand or your MD's brand, the corporate brand of the business, and then your consultant's brand. So that sort of hits the circle there of what. So all three brands need to align against your standards, your culture, your growth, and your credibility. It's not about the hustle or the volume because most buyers of products or services, let's call it, filter those things out because they look for trust and quality. And you think about how you buy anything today, nowadays, even if you go onto Amazon, you look at the cheapest price first, you then go down to the reviews. And if the trust or the quality isn't mentioned in those reviews, you tend to discount them. So it's the same when people buy the businesses and things like that, but obviously a larger scale. So the work for every owner who's built a business is to really, I think, to institutionalize the brand, turn it into methodology, turn it into culture, but then turn the second tier of leadership into that as well, because that bench carries the positioning forward. So now the brand also becomes important for the leadership spine as well as the founder. And I think that's where a lot of founders, because they never train the management team, they never invest in the management team, leave lots of multiples on the table because they haven't got a succession plan. So I think leaders who sell best aren't obviously sometimes the most visible, but they're the ones whose visibility built something that outlasts them. And I think that's a difference. And that's the difference between brand that earns you income and a brand that earns you an exit. And I think there's a lot of people trying to find an exit. And we've talked about this at the beginning of the year, that I think that this year, and it's starting to prove that already by the stats that I was reading the other day, that there are now a lot. I think there's 25% uplift in Q1 of this year on recruitment agencies being bought and sold than it was in Q4, the second half of 2025. So it says the market is looking for value. But that again is what happens at this time of economic cycles. The big players come out and buy smaller players that could add benefit to them, but only if these type of things that we're talking about today are actually met properly.
Yeah, definitely.
The last question, it's always going to be an interesting question, is this. If a recruitment leader watching this today takes only one thing away and acts on it in the next 30 days, what's the single highest leverage move that they could make? And what's the most common mistake that you see leaders make when they try and build their brand without the right guidance?
If you take one thing away from today, it would be, if you don't have a personal brand that has some equity, spend time to develop. Spend time to think about what you want to be known for, what you want to be an authority on, and how you're going to position yourself to make yourself an authority. And if you're shy, and there are plenty of leaders who are shy, who don't want to be put out there, think about working with a coach or a mentor or someone to help you develop yourself and that mindset that says, I need to get myself out there. If you have a personal brand, is it easy to understand what you are and what you want to be known for? Yeah, and if it's a little bit all over the place, try to refine it so you've got that sort of pinpoint laser focus as opposed to spotlight focus. Laser focus on the one player in the ground rather than spotlight focus on the whole ground. And just take a bit of time to think about what do you look like from the other side, because it does add value to your business. It adds value to your bottom line, and it makes it important for your staff to say, yeah, I'm working for somebody that really has an influence and matters in the industry.
I looked at this again, and I went off and spoke to a couple of people actually yesterday, just to sort of settle my argument in my own head about how I was going to answer this question. I genuinely did, because I was just sort of debating how to answer this. Okay. And I think the single heaviest leverage move is a complete and honest order of where you stand across the following dimensions in a business. So where's your positioning? Where's your visibility? What content are you putting out? What's your reputation like? How good is your network? And what's your commercial pull through? And you can't build what you can't measure, but you can measure all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think then what I would do with my leaders from there is pick one thing, not all of them, pick one thing and try and, once you try and fix everything, you know that nothing ever gets fixed. So I would look at the lowest scoring one of those products, one of those positioning values, and I would look at, say, what's the highest commercial value return I can get from there. So if I looked at, say, visibility, what's the highest commercial value I can get from a return? If I increase my visibility, how much over time does that need from there? And I think the biggest mistake is that we start content before we start with positioning. And everyone's writing content rather than thinking about what positioning do I need, and therefore that will dictate the content. So I think posting without a point of view is just adding noise to a noisy market that we've talked about. It is very noisy from there, and it trains your audience to really ignore you because you're just posting for posting's sake. And I think the second biggest thing is going it alone. Brand is one area where leaders consistently underestimate the value of the outside eye. Can you read the label from the inside of the bottle? And the answer is no, you can't. So you've only got to go outside the bottle to have a look at what label looks like to see whether it's good and attractive to the people looking from the outside in. And I think we never consider, and I think we are absolutely in that bucket. We never consider what our clients think, what our candidates think, what the market thinks, because we know best from looking from the inside out when we potentially don't. So I think that's exactly where we work with leaders. And we directly or indirectly, everything that we do from our coaching and mentoring builds that up. And it's either will it build the brand or will it damage the brand, whether it's indirectly or directly with that. And I think the diagnosis of where a brand is defines the positioning that drives the commercial outcomes. And that builds the cadence and accountability that turns it into an asset that you can bank on. And I think that's the bit we miss. Brand is at risk every time an interaction, or your brand is at risk, your business brand, your personal brand, your company's brand, is every time you have an interaction with a client, a candidate, a potential buyer, and most importantly, with your employees and your employee pool. It's your business, therefore it's your brand. How you add to it, how you add your consultants to it, all counts, because that's all there, and you can see that. One bad interaction with a client can have massive effect. That's all about your brand positioning. And I think it's a very difficult conversation to have, isn't it, Dave? As we've had it with lots of businesses.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely.
Because they don't see how that brand filters through everything that you do. They just see it as a marketing tool of get the company name out there. It's not about your company name. It's about how your brand makes people feel and how it engages them to buy or work with you from there.
Absolutely right.
Dave, thank you very much for your time and thanks for your input as always. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for your time. I hope you enjoyed today's session. We're back next week. We think we are just building a pool at the moment because Dave is away. Paul is away and Heather's away. It seems everyone's away next week. So we're just building a view of what we could be doing next week, if not with the week after. So, ladies and gents, thanks for your time. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Take care. Thanks, Ed.